All right. Welcome. Hello, everybody. My name's 12 Gauge. If you've been here to my channel before, welcome back. If this is your first time here, I hope that you find something that interests you, something that tickles your mindset, and gives you a little bit of insight on some of the things that we discuss here, such as true crime, amongst other things. Everything that is said here is my opinion only. I give commentary on things that have been discussed, things that have been presented by other creators, and I try not to create any drama on my page, my channel. Um, like I said, I hope that you find something that you enjoy, something that enables you to keep coming back. Sorry, I'm a little late tonight. I was at the gym, lost track of time. It's been a weird day. I feel like I just have not had enough time to just make everything that I needed to complete. I was gonna have a co-host up here tonight, but I don't think she's able to come up, so I'm gonna try to do this solo. Um, we're gonna talk about the Idaho 4, not on any other area, but the forensic part of it. I'm gonna be talking about deep diving into the forensics. Um, And what got me thinking into this was I was watching Forensic Files the other day, and I thought to myself, you know what? They said, and Taylor had stated, there was no DNA, no blood in the car or on him linking him to the crimes. And I thought, okay. And for the longest time, people have been hanging on to that. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? Well, maybe there is no DNA, but maybe there's fibers. Maybe there's some kind of hair or something that they didn't discuss. So just for the just for the sake of not having any information other than that crazy trial hearing yesterday, I'm gonna dive into this area just to give some insight on the forensic pathology of it all because I'm about to study this area in my next semester. So I'm trying to get I'm trying to get a jump on it. Hey, Sergeant Friday, how you doing, buddy? You're kicking ass over there on your channel. Great job. Um, so the first video that I want to present is talking about the forensic pathology, and it's going to break down a little bit about the crime lab and give you an insight on how these type of things are done, what they look into, and basically um, the procedures in which this stuff takes place. So I hope you enjoy this. Here we go. Before we begin, I'd like to give credit to Inside the Crime Lab Forensic Chemistry Unit by Denver Police. Thank you so much for making this video so that I could utilize it for information purposes only. I always forget to do that.
The Forensic Chemistry Unit handles over 5,000 narcotics cases per year, which requires the analysis of tens of thousands of items. The unit processes over 800 blood alcohol cases each year, used to determine if a DUI has been committed. The Forensic Chemistry Unit also performs an analysis for ignitable liquids in arson investigations to assist the Denver Police and Fire Departments. As part of its state-of-the-art laboratory, the Forensic Chemistry Unit has gas generators to produce all the gases used by its instruments. The generators produce hydrogen as a carrier gas and fuel gas, nitrogen as a carrier gas, and ultra-purified zero air used in flame ionization detectors and to purge water from some instrumentation. Here, vials of blood are being prepared for headspace analysis, used in suspected DUI cases. alcohol in the blood samples is analyzed by heating the blood to force the volatile alcohol into the air at the top of the vial. To start the process, samples are placed into a heated headspace autosampler. This machine takes the vials and places them into an oven. When they reach the proper temperature, a sample is collected from the headspace and injected into an instrument called a gas chromatograph. The alcohol value of the blood sample can then be determined. A common instrument used to analyze controlled substances is the Fourier transform infrared spectrophotometer. It takes approximately 30 seconds to perform this analysis, which produces a structural identification of relatively pure organic compounds. Controlled substances are verified using a series of color tests to indicate the possible presence of different narcotics. The orange color here indicates the sample contains an amphetamine-like compound, possibly methamphetamine. The next sample remains pink after testing, indicating it does not contain cocaine. And the third sample turns a dark blue color, which means there is a secondary amine present. The result of these three tests show the sample is likely methamphetamine. In addition to narcotics testing,
Okay, one of the reasons that I wanted to show this video right here is because I don't know if you remember when the coroner was asked if they were going to do toxicology reports, her quote stated that she didn't believe so because there was no need for toxicology reports based on the criminal act that happened. Well, had they done toxicology, and I'm pretty sure they did, this is why I wanted to show this video because this is the process in which they test whether somebody has any kind of chemicals in their body. This is one of the tests that they run.
the forensic chemistry unit also analyzes for ignitable liquid in arson debris cases. The sample being prepared here will be heated in an oven along with the carbon tab. The small tab, which is placed on the lid of the testing container, will absorb any volatile compounds that are driven off the material inside. Those compounds are then extracted from the carbon tab using a solvent. They can be analyzed using an instrument called a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, which is also used in controlled substance analysis.
Okay, that was quite interesting. I mean, it's a lot of scientific stuff, but it's good for information value. To me, it's more informative than talking about the grub truck or something of that nature that's already been discussed 100 million times, or something that we've already discussed 100 million times. And it's always knowledge is power. So the more knowledge that we possess, the more powerful we become. The next part that I want to show you is the blood splatter. This individual is going to break down blood splatter, and hopefully, I didn't watch this whole video, but he's going to break it down to the point where it's easier to understand. Because, in a crime scene, when we think of, and this is um, what I did the other night when I presented the crime scene analysis, where the team came in after a stabbing. They marked down the marker, they tagged everything, they took photographs, they measured things and all this and that. I don't believe that individuals think that there's different teams that come in and do a specific job. In the movies and TV shows, it's pretty much the lead actors that are running the show. So they're coming into the crime scene, they're looking for evidence, they're going into the lab and they're running the show with the technicians and all this and that and the other. But that's not how it goes. That's not how it goes at all. So let's go ahead and look at this. And Let's see what page. There we go.
There we go. Hi, I'm Matthew Steiner.
Matt is a certified senior crime scene analyst. He's explained crime scene forensics in Technique Critique.
So that's a really interesting yet very illegal way to get DNA from somebody. Today, I'm going to show you how to analyze various bloodstain patterns.
In this episode, we'll learn the techniques forensics experts use to investigate bloodstain patterns, ranging from easy to difficult.
So normally when we go to a crime scene, it's not set up like this, unless we have some sort of Dexter-esque crime scene where the killer really planned it out. Today, we're doing on set for safety purposes. For us at crime scenes, when we investigate them, safety is number one. We want to protect ourselves. There could be various bloodborne pathogens that we're dealing with. And secondly, we don't want to contaminate the crime scene. So we don't want the hairs and fibers on ourselves, the DNA that's shedding off us, falling onto our evidence. At a crime scene, we'd wear multiple layers of gloves if we're going to be handling evidence. And then we'd want to wear eye protection if there's like a splash hazard with blood that hasn't been dried. So our Tyvek suit covers most of our body, including our feet, because we wouldn't want to be introducing our shoe wear impressions into a crime scene or destroying evidence that's there. So normally I'd be wearing a mask, but I don't think it's a really good look for talking on camera. Next, we're going to talk about the three main categories of bloodstains that we can encounter at a crime scene. Today, we're going to be using defibrinated sheep's blood. We have taken the fibrin out of this blood. Fibrin is a protein that's in our plasma that causes our blood to clot. So if we use regular whole blood that had the fibrin in it, we'd have a clotted mess inside this bottle. Bloodstain pattern analysts correlate the appearance of these bloodstain patterns at a crime scene to a mechanism by which they were created. It isn't a crystal ball. It isn't like the way TV presents it, where a crime scene investigator walks into a scene and could tell you every single action that happened inside that crime scene from beginning to end. Analysts can correlate the static bloodstains at a crime scene with dynamic forces that create them. So what we look at is specific stain patterns, and we could figure out how they possibly were created. And then with that, we could show a small window of time, not the whole crime, but that this type of force could have created this sort of pattern. So passive patterns are patterns that are created without any sort of outside external force other than gravity or contact. So we're going to first start off with dropping blood at 90 degrees to see what we get. So I'm going to take a pipette and a small amount of blood and hold it directly above and drop it. So when our sphere of blood strikes the surface at 90 degrees, we have a very even, round circle at a crime scene. But also what affects the way our bloodstain looks is the surface itself. We have plexiglass, and we notice that the edge characteristics of our bloodstain are very even. Now that we observed the way that blood acts on a smooth surface, let's try tile, which has a little bit of texture to it. One drop of blood straight down onto a different surface now. You can see a little bit of scalloping around the edges there. That's because of the surface texture. So the scalloping is just the different ways that we describe the edge characteristics of bloodstains. So it could be smooth, uniform, it could be scalloped, or it could be spiny. So now we change the surface to a rougher surface, wood. So we can see a vast difference from where we started, where we had smooth edge characteristics. Now we have this spinier pattern because that blood drop is being disrupted by the surface itself. And we can also see we have some satellite stains. Satellite stains are stains that come off a parent stain. So this main stain here is my parent stain. In this case, because of the disruption, they are being forced out from the center of it. We also see satellite spatter when blood is being dripped into blood. Typically at a crime scene, especially with stabbings, we want to look for these drip patterns. It could be that the suspect accidentally cuts themselves and they're moving around a crime scene and fleeing the crime scene, and they could leave blood trails that we could follow. Next, we're going to be looking at contact transfer stains. A transfer pattern is a passive pattern where we have a bloody surface coming in contact with another surface. And then sometimes we could actually figure out what made that transfer, whether it was a hand or a weapon or someone's clothing. I mean, that's the best type of evidence that we could have at a crime scene. So we have the victim's blood and we have the suspect's impression. There's very few explanations of how that happens. So we're going to start off with a shoe wear impression in blood. So this could be our victim walking through blood, creating patterns in our crime scene, or this could be the suspect's shoe wear impression. We're going to coat the bottom of the shoe and we're going to transfer the pattern of the bottom of the shoe to our clean surface. So I have my shoe wear that's completely coated in blood. And then inside that crime scene, we have a transfer of that pattern. And we'll notice is that that pattern gets lighter and lighter as we move along. What we don't see with our naked eye, we could find later on with chemicals like luminol or blue star. So we could see a continuation of that pattern as someone walks away from a crime scene. Sometimes.
Okay, so we know that there was a latent shoe print found. If you notice on the third footprint, it got lighter, but there's still blood there. So the latent shoe print could have been cleaned up and there could have been traces of that blood still on the surface. One thing I want to talk about as well is the floors were wooden, even if it was not real wood, it was that cheap wood stuff. So if there was any cracks or whatever in the wood floor and there was any blood, you know how everybody said, well, they had 8 hours to clean it up. They had 8 hours to do this, that, and the other. Well, how could you get in those crevices and clean up all the blood where people cannot see that there are blood drops? Sarge, do you have any? You want to come up here in a minute and we'll discuss this after we watch this video? Because I want some debate here.
To see transfer patterns in textiles. So next we're going to take some blood, saturate a portion of our jeans with it, and we're going to transfer that onto our surface. So sometimes in real crime scenes, these get misinterpreted as the lines of minutia in your fingerprints or palm print. What we would see is that unlike fingerprints, they're just straight lines. Either way, we would document this and collect it, send to the lab, and then under magnification, analyze it. So next we're going to discuss how movement could affect these transfer stain patterns. So I'm going to take some blood and put it onto my hand and then move that across the surface. So if I touch the surface and then move my hand, we see what's called feathering, the effect of movement on blood, just like if I took a paintbrush and moved it across a wall. In the beginning, it would be darker, but eventually it would get lighter. So this feathering effect helps us interpret movement at a crime scene. This could be found at a crime scene in many different ways. One could be a suspect has blood on their hands and they move it across a clean surface. And another very common way that we see these patterns at a crime scene are what's called drag marks. We have a victim that's bleeding and either they're moving through the scene or someone's dragging them through the scene. And we see the same effect, that feathering going towards the body. Next, we're going to cover flow patterns, and that is a volume of blood being affected by gravity. So we can see here is that gravity is pulling upon that blood and pulling it down on our surface. At crime scenes, this may be very valuable evidence when we observe our victims' injuries. A person had an injury to their shoulder. If they're standing or if their body is erect, that flow pattern should go straight down their arm. But
okay, that's interesting because what did that pattern look like? We've seen that pattern before, haven't we? It was located where? On the outside wall, right?
Yes, sir.
So he just said if somebody's standing erect, I mean,
well, that wouldn't have anything to do with what you saw on that wall.
If he was standing straight up, that's what he meant. If he was standing straight up and he was like stabbed on the shoulder, then it would be going down the shoulder and ultimately on the floor. Before we move on.
No, wait.
Okay.
If you were laying against the wall on the floor and against the wall and blood was puddling under you, it would then exit the house and run down the foundation that way.
Okay. Yeah.
See, remember you were talking about seeping through the floor cracks and stuff?
Yes.
That my best guess is that foundation, if that is truly blood from the crime, that came from a puddle of blood that leaked through the floor and out the foundation. Not whether you wouldn't need to be standing, sitting, laying down. You would just need to be able to present blood in that area enough for it to soak through the floor to get outside.
Yeah. So would you say that, like there had to be, estimating, okay. Would you say that there was a coagulation of blood that seeped through the floor at that corner? Or do you think that actually somebody was close enough in proximity that it kind of ran down? Just on
It could be a combination of things. That floor may, it's a rental property. What if the floor sags towards the wall?
Right.
The blood could have ran across the floor, through the cracks in the floor to the wall. At the seam of the wall and the floor, it leaked down to the. I could see it happening in a number of different ways, but I don't know for a fact. I don't think any of us do that blood on that wall was a result of the crime. It
Right.
certainly looks like it. It's certainly in a location that argues that it is, but I don't know that anybody confirmed it was really blood there.
That's
In
true.
fairness, right?
Well, let's keep going. Let's see what this man has to say. And this is interesting stuff right
If they've
here.
been moved or this movement or that injury was caused when they were laying down, we'd see a different flow pattern. So next we're going to discuss saturation and pooling patterns that we'd have at a crime scene. Saturation and pooling patterns could tell us that someone is bleeding in a certain part in a crime scene for a period of time. You know, sometimes when we see bubbles at a scene, that could mean that we have a expirated pattern or a pattern that's coming from an airway. But let's pop those because we don't want. But what this could tell me is that we had accumulation of blood there and that there has been no movement, because if this happened and then we moved the shirt, we would see that the blood would move in that direction. Typically we'll see this on mattresses or beds or bedding, and then it would absorb a little more. So now we're going to have an accumulation of blood on a non-porous surface, and we'll see pooling. So pooling and saturation, it's the same mechanism that we're looking at, just the accumulation of blood. But with pooling, the blood is not being absorbed into the surface. For pools of blood, what we'll see with actual whole blood that has fibrin in it, they will dry a lot slower than it would in something that's absorbent. But also we're going to see over a period of time is clotting inside that pool. And then sometimes we'll see affect what's called serum separation. So the edges of this will be clear where we see the plasma of the blood as it separates. So now we're moving on to the spatter category of bloodstain pattern analysis. With this category of bloodstains, we're looking at some sort of external force on an open source of blood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small amount of blood on our wood here. I'm going to strike it with a hammer. And what we should see is an impact spatter on the plexiglass in front of us. Put on my goggles. I'm going to put my hood up. Give us a small amount of blood here. All right, ready? There we go. So as you can see, not only do we have impact spatter on the plexiglass in front of us, we also have it on our suspect here. Okay, so we applied force to an open source of blood, and we have a resulting impact stain. Our stain pattern, what we'll notice is directly opposite where the force was applied, we have our blood striking that surface at 90 degrees. So these stains that we have right here near the bottom are circular. But the further we move away from that source, these blood stains are now hitting this surface at an angle. So our stains are more elliptical. Bludgeoning would be the most common way that we get these stains, but it could be that we have the force of a bullet passing through somebody. So we have a phenomenon called forward spatter and back spatter. So if someone is shot and a bullet passes through, say, their shoulder, we have blood going in the direction of the force, so with the bullet out of the exit. But we also have blood going the opposition of the force, and that's what we call back spatter. First off, we started by creating different patterns that we could analyze. Next step, we're going to look at something a little more difficult. Next, we're going to do is calculate the area of convergence. That's a two-dimensional area on our surface. If we draw a line through the long axis of several stains where all these lines will meet, they should converge in an area somewhere in the center here. What I want to do is pick several stains that are elliptical from different sides of the pattern. We're looking at this to solve where this blood came from. I'm going to start with this stain here, and I'm going to line up so that I'm drawing a line through the long axis of my stain. So this is where the tail is going to help me out to figure out the directionality, but also to line up my ruler. And then sometimes what we'll do is just kind of show for a jury an arrow the direction that stain was going. So then I'll move around the pattern from different sides of it and draw through different stains. So this isn't done at every crime scene, but when we have a pattern like this, we have elliptical stains along the outside, and we have some circular stains towards the inside. This is the perfect opportunity for us to do some analysis. I could keep going and draw more lines through more stains, and it should all be coming back to the same general direction. So if this was on the wall and this was very low, this could be very powerful evidence to show that, that was low to the ground where this impact happened. Since we identified different stains that are striking our surface at different angles, we're going to figure out the angle of impact that these stains hit our surface. We do that by measuring the length of the stain. We divide it into the width of the stain, and the arc sine of that number will give us our angle of impact. So we're measuring stains. We always want to use millimeters, allows us for smaller measurements. So what we could also use is a digital caliper, and that will give us precise sub-millimeter measurements. So I want to measure the length of the stain, the long axis of the stain. So this is 3.1 millimeters. And then I'd measure the width of it. So I'm measuring the widest part of the stain. That's 1.7 millimeters. We're going to divide 3.1 into 1.7. So if we do the arc sine of that number, that will give us the angle of impact, which is 33.25. If you had a regular ruler, you would just have to round up to the closest millimeter. So in this case, this stain is 4 millimeters. And then we measure the width of it. It is 2 millimeters. So we would divide 4 into 2, which gives us 0.5. And the arc sine of 0.5 is 30 degrees. And we can see it's basically at the same distance from our center, but just on the other side. If we look at this two-dimensionally, we know that these lines of our area of convergence meet here. But if I want to think about it three-dimensionally, that my blood is coming from somewhere above it here. So the next step will be is that we're going to calculate the area of origin. If it's coming in at a right angle here, I have a triangle. So this will be my adjacent side of the triangle. I know that it's 90 degrees from here. So that's my right triangle. And then this side that the path takes is the hypotenuse of the triangle. And so if I know the distance from my stain to my area of convergence, and I want to figure out how far away my area of origin is here in space, if I do the tangent of that, I could figure out the side, like SOHCAHTOA. When we analyze blood stains in a field, I always feel it's better to do all these methods. We should be coming up with similar results, but if you messed up somewhere, one of those is going to be correct. Next up, we're going to try something a little more difficult, interpreting relationships. There's an adage that forensic science is the art of observation governed by science. So we have observed our stain patterns at our crime scene, and we're going to interpret how these possibly were created. So if I go to a crime scene and I see that there's some clothing there, eventually I'm going to recover this. But after I recover it and I see that there's passive stains underneath it, I know that this came after this, that this wasn't in place, that this was placed afterwards. And if I don't see a transfer of blood on here, it could be that this was already dry by the time this clothing went on top of it. So now we're looking at a passive drip pattern. This could be the victim's blood. This could be the suspect's blood. We won't know until we sample it and send it off for analysis. What we can interpret from this could be movement. So if this trail of blood is leading away from the scene, we would see those tails going in a direction of travel. Now we're looking at a white pattern. We have a pre-existing stain that something came in contact and moved through it. So we could see from our discussion earlier of feathering that the directionality is coming towards me. Something is passively dripping blood. That could be a weapon, that could be a victim, that could be our suspect, and then something later on comes through it. That could be someone trying to clean up the stain. This could also be that maybe someone was dragged through this or there was some sort of movement through that stain. So that was a white pattern. Now we have a swipe pattern. Blood is on something here, and we could see, again, that same feathering going in a direction of travel. We have a transfer pattern with movement, which is a swipe pattern. There's blood on something, and then we're just moving that in a direction. Usually when it's a white pattern, we could see those original stains. So they're drying, and then someone tries to wipe them off with a cloth. Now we're looking at a cast-off pattern. So this is a subcategory of spatter. That's a projection mechanism. So blood is on an object, and we're moving that object in space. That could be someone's hand, that could be a pipe, that could be a bat, that could be a knife. And as that object moves, blood will be flung off it, and we have these very distinct linear patterns or curvy linear patterns. At a crime scene, if we see these cast-off patterns, they can go up the walls, they can go across the floor, and even onto the ceiling. So we're looking at a spatter pattern, but we have a normally continuous drops of blood that are being interrupted or blocked by something. And that gives us a pattern, what's called the void. Sometimes we have crime scenes where there's something important that would be in that pool or in that pattern or that spatter pattern, and it's been removed. So it could be someone's bag or a cell phone, their wallet. I had a crime scene where someone was bludgeoned, And adjacent to his head was the complete absence of blood spatter. Looking to the left of him, there was a spatter pattern. It didn't line up. What we determined was that the curtains inside of the hotel room were open at the time of the crime and then closed later on. We've gone over how these patterns are created, our different categories of patterns, and what we can interpret from these patterns at a crime scene. This is not a simple process. This stuff takes time, training, and experience. And beyond that, there's no absolutes with any of this. There's no one specific answer, then it's only that one answer. I hope you guys learned a lot.
I'd like to give Wired the credit for this video. The forensics expert explains how analysis or how to analyze blood stain patterns. Wired, thank you so much for this video. While I'm thinking about it, before we go on to the next one, Sergeant Friday, how there's been rumors, and I'm going to call them rumors because I don't want to say speculation, because they are just that, rumors. There's no basis on them whatsoever. Do you remember when people were talking about how they figured that the bodies were taken from another location into the house and positioned like staged? Do you remember that?
You mean
You remember that?
I call that a glory hole conversation, because I remember people talking about it, but there's no evidence to even bring up that possibility.
Right.
Right.
So why I was bringing this up is you'd believe that if that happened and they were to run these bodies through any kind of blood, or even if the body was dripping in blood, it would make that feathered blood thing that he just showed. Do you remember when he showed where the blood was kind of drug through whatever, or something was drugged through the blood and it made like a drag mark? So I mean,
I think a lot of these theories that people have come up with to argue pro guilt or not guilt, they're not based on any of the factual data given us, and therefore they're not, to me, they're a distraction, because it creates people running down rabbit holes that end up producing nothing but grief. Does that make sense?
Of course it does.
But if these bodies were moved either in or out of that location, how they fell, the direction under which they fell, all of that, yes, can be determined in most cases by blood, the way the blood stain patterns are. So if you're shot and you fall to the left or fall backwards, or you hit the ground and you roll over in pain, your last dying breaths, right? You see aspirated blood on the ground. So that the idea and the value of knowing a scientific blood splatter analysis like you just showed, that can tell you a whole bunch of things. And in this case, we have no data about any kind of forensic reviews of any of the evidence, other than
we don't.
What do we have? We have what we do have. What would be nice is to show the pictures and the clips of the investigators at Queen Road versus the gentleman you just showed us in that white outfit with multiple layers of glove and footy protection and hoods and safety glasses. Where was that on Queen Road? Where were those investigators?
Weren't a lot of those pictures like upstairs on the third floor?
Well, they had people all over the place going in and out on the ground floor.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, it didn't look like they were doing the kind of analysis like this dude was just doing.
Correct. That's the point.
Unless they were in there, unless somebody else was doing the blood splatter analysis. I mean, it would be nice to know how long they took investigating this house.
Well, can I say that it's safe to say it's safe to say this. The bloody shoe print was found on the second run through. Right? So that means the first pass through must not have included investigators that were looking for DNA and blood samples. Right? Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, they weren't looking for any kind of latent prints or anything like that. They were they
So,
were dusting and they were doing other things. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
and so
You're
you've got two different entries into the home for evidence collection. The first one did not, to our knowledge, net any kind of shoe print. It was the second one that did so. And to get it on the second one, after you had a troop of people going in and out of that house that were not wearing PPE, makes that evidence basically useless. I propose to you that the evidence collected from the scene of that crime, based under the conditions that we were exposed to when we saw videos, when we saw pictures of these people doing their work, there's one lady sneezing into the cuff of her arm.
Yeah, I remember
Okay.
that. I
They're
remember.
not wearing proper protection. They're wearing police jackets, regular windbreakers, and they've got Q-tips, and they're looking for. Does a Q-tip and a windbreaker equate to a professional crime scene investigation? And I would say no.
I mean, you didn't see any. I mean, I know we weren't preferent to any of that. We didn't see even the bodies being taken out. We didn't see any of that.
No.
But it happened. So hopefully that they didn't mess this up, Hopefully they
But
didn't mess this crime scene up.
you don't have to prove they messed it up. You just have to show that it was mishandled. And I think
Well,
we
yeah.
could agree that that appears to have been mishandled there. You agree with that?
I agree. I agree that it was a mishandling, probably of procedure. They probably got in over their head. They didn't really realize how significant professionalism would be in this case. You know,
Or they're not
but
equipped, because this is
I
not
mean,
the
you
first
just
case
you
that
just
made these
made
mistakes. Wait,
you just made a point. They weren't using the proper attire the way they were supposed to. They were
well,
wearing windbreakers. They were just sneezing into their arms and stuff like that. I mean, that's not professionalism right there.
and the other thing is, this was also in a case where they accused a doctor, a back doctor, whatever you call them guys, chiropractor, of killing another chiropractor. Their crime scene
Yes.
investigators
That
handled
was,
that
that
like
was
a bear at a china shop.
the Giglio case, right?
No. In Idaho, they falsely accused a chiropractor of killing a man, shooting him through a window, and he was exonerated, not because they took him to trial, but because the cops in the forensic unit were shown to be corrupt. Not only
Oh,
did they
okay, yeah,
mishandle their job, but they actually had evidence exonerating the man they kept from him. You
I
see?
remember that case. I
And this
remember
is in
now.
Idaho. This is in that area. As a matter of fact, one of the policemen involved with that case is actually part of the Koberger investigation.
And I remember they said that the coroner in that case didn't show up for 24 hours later.
Yeah. Well, the coroner's a
That body,
figurehead.
that body stayed in that one location. Whatever that guy that got shot through the window, like you said,
Right.
stayed in that spot for 24 hours.
The coroner, though, just in this town, is a figurehead. They're a political figure. They are not someone that performs an autopsy. They're not
Okay.
someone that performs and it's a crime scene investigation. They are not that person like you see on TV. That is not what they are in Idaho.
Yeah, they glorify them on TV, don't they? They glorify
Yeah.
everybody's position. Let's watch
Yeah.
this
And
other video and then we'll talk a little more, okay? I
all
got
right, I'll be
one more video to show. This one is I can't even remember what all these videos. I should have named them better. Oh, this guy's talking about how they helped solve the Gardens of the Bay murder case. And this is by CNA. Thank you for the video. And here we go.
The mortuary actually receives about 12 to 13 cases per day. That's an average. The maximum I've had actually in one day was 28. As a forensic pathologist, we support coronial medical legal death investigation as well as the criminal justice system. We use our medical knowledge based in pathology in order to say, for example, how diseases cause death and how injuries affect the person and also how they cause death. So when we receive the body, we would do some basic processing as well as produce photograph that would be used for identification purposes. So after the basic processing, we would do a CT scan, and it allows us to really look inside the body. Together with that, as well as information from the police, information from medical records, we can better advise the coroner as to whether or not an autopsy is actually required. There are probably quite a few misconceptions in terms of what a forensic pathologist do, because if you look at movies or TV series, one of the things that we don't do is actually performing the analysis of the evidence that's collected from the body. Say, for example, if I have a sample of blood, I don't actually do the toxicological analysis. It's actually sent to a specialized lab in order to do that. So the cold room that we have is one that is used for storing bodies in other places as well. That's because for the space that is allocated for the cold room, we can actually store more bodies. But actually in our isolation area, we actually have storage that is a drawer style, so kind of similar to the one that you would see in some hospitals.
A man has been found guilty of murdering his Chinese mistress at Gardens by the Bay in 2016.
This is actually the Gardens by the Bay murder. The police wanted me to see if I could identify any human remains amongst all the debris that was there. So I combed through all that debris, and this took many hours. And at some point in time, we actually found some strands of hair. So one of the first things that I did was to quickly look at it under the microscope. So because there are characteristics between human hair and animal hair, so it turned out to be human hair. Through that, they were actually able to identify the deceased person. On average, a routine autopsy would be somewhere between 1 to 2 hours. But when we talk about, say, homicide cases or cases in which are a bit more complex, then that could take upwards of 6 hours or even more. So one of the things that we can do at the time of autopsy is to sample tissue, allow us to see things that may not have been obvious to the naked eye. I don't really want to pick one as in like the one that would best portray my job. But I will tell you the one that I like the most. The one that I like the most is actually CSI Miami. But that's only because everybody looks very cool in that show.
Okay, I thought that was going to get more in depth, but obviously it didn't. So,
You know what they say, don't you? They're the 7 P's. You know what the 7 P's are?
what are the 7P?
Well, prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. You got to hate me, 12 gauge. I get it.
Hey, I skimmed about 3 minutes of that video before I saved it. So I didn't get to the part where I actually thought they were going to cut those mannequins open and have like artificial,
Yeah.
organs and stuff in there.
No, we've seen enough of that on TV. It's how they apply this to criminal cases, the scientific methods that they use, I think are fairly solid. I think DNA though is a very dangerous area of identification because there's too many cases under which the collection, the testing, the handling, and the misidentifying of people have happened with that. Unlike with a fingerprint, it's unambiguous, and the odds of you having a fingerprint being matched by somebody else is almost impossible. Okay, Where
Yes.
DNA, the scientific process, right from the collection point itself, even the depositing of it can create a problem with the identification of it. Right? So
Right.
it mixes with the victims, or it can be like in the Koberger case, it's transfer DNA. As that man, the other man had pointed out, we shed DNA all day long in the other video. The guy that was wearing the white outfit, and he told us that's why they wear that, to prevent their DNA they shed from getting into the crime scene. But it's even more in depth than that. Their street clothes carry the DNA of strangers. And that
Right.
stranger
That
DNA
would
can
be
be shed.
that transfer
Yeah.
DNA that you're talking about right there, right?
Right. And the other thing too, when it comes to the DNA and the scientific parts of this case, they've been very, very skeptical. They've given us very little information, if any at all. Some of the statements made by the coroner, people have attacked her over about no toxicology. So we've had those rabbit holes.
Right.
But the issue that doesn't really get much attention, and the issue that matters the most, is Othrum's proprietary software to magnify the DNA to create a baseline for an identity. That particular software, that particular technology is not being released to the defendant. It's protected more than the guy's life. This guy could face the death penalty in this case, right? And yet the software or the processes they use, for some reason, are being withheld from the defendant. And that process that was used should be something a separate expert, scientific expert, comes in and examines. And do you follow me?
Yeah. And
How they
hopefully he does
Yeah.
get that to happen, because I mean, he needs as many people, if he is truly innocent, he needs as many people on his side as possible.
Well,
You
even
know?
on a different point, my point of view is that anything used in a case to determine and accuse you of a crime, 12 gauge, is to be given to you to defend yourself.
Right.
Every step that they take, every witness they question, everything that they do must be discoverable to the accused. And how they went about things must be questioned, because if they don't read you your rights, something as simple as that, correct? Then the case is dismissed.
Correct.
And if
Well,
you have
it's kind of like the pings, like the pings. They're gonna tear those apart. Kind of like you said one time. You said in one other panel you were on, you said they had a cop that was interpreting the pings, not
right.
an analysis person. They had a cop.
Well, it's written in a document that was just Elena streamed today. It's in there. And I've said this since the beginning. The policeman that was reviewing the information collected as obtained by a warrant. So his his cell phone location information, he interpreted it after talking to FBI cast members. The FBI cast members did not make the determined locations for Mr. Koberger. A policeman in Idaho did, that was not a professional cast person. That's
So
been
what
that.
so what does that tell you when you hear that? I mean, when you hear that it wasn't the FBI, but it was another person that was not really experienced enough, I would say, to make that determination. What does that say to you?
Well, that tells me why they're having a problem supplying discovery to Ann Taylor on the cast. Remember the last hearing she was at? She said, Your Honor, I have a summary of the cast, but I don't have the actual report and the work that
Right.
this summary is based on. And I suspect the problem is because the FBI did not officially have this case, nor did they officially act in this case. And that's why he talked to him on the phone. There's a lot of problems with this case that Americans should pay attention to, because it's kind of frightening. And that's irrespective of his guilt or innocence.
Well, I mean, I hate to get off topic here, but I don't know if you watched that Apple River stabbing, any of that, but he was convicted today of first degree
I didn't
right?
know about the case. I've never heard of it.
Okay, you might look into that. He was convicted of first degree reckless homicide or something like that. What
Okay.
the basis of it was is this guy was 54-year-old man. Him and his family and buddies went tubing. One of his buddies lost their cell phone in a case.
Mm-hmm.
He walked downstream or down the river to hopefully head it off, and he's looking for it with a snorkel and looking underwater. Well, a group of kids, they're 17 years old. There's probably 5 or 6 of them. They're all drunk, smoking weed. They start hackling the dude. They
Mm-hmm.
start saying he's looking for little girls and he's doing all this. And there's a video to support them.
Are they YouTubers? I'm just kidding.
I don't know. They might be. But anyways, they start saying that, right? He's looking for little girls. He's a raper and this and that and the other. So the guy thinks that one of the kids has the cell phone because he doesn't know. He just sees a cell phone, right? So he heads toward over there and he realizes, no, that's not the cell phone. So some adults from another group come and confront the man, and there's these 2 ladies yelling at him. One of the ladies like puts her hand up to him, and then he's like looks down river and he sees his friends and everything. He's waving to him. Well, the lady's screaming at him in his face. And then all of a sudden, this dude comes and he pushes him. And as he falls in the water, he punches him. Another guy pushes him on the back, throws him back down. Well, by this point, he has like one of those fishing knives, that you cut twine with, one of those little bitty ones. Well, he
Mhm.
has one of those in the side of his shorts. So he pulls it out, and they're still coming at him. So he stabs. He stabs 2 females, 2 guys, 2 adults, and a 17-year-old kid, which he ended up killing.
Okay.
So they found him guilty of all that. He was trying to get self-defense, which if you watch the video, I suggest that you go watch that video and you make up your
Did he
mind.
did he did he have? Let me ask you this: when you watched the video, did you look to see if he had an opportunity to retreat?
He did.
Okay. If he had an opportunity to retreat and he continued with his assault, okay, that there at that point is when you start to say the guy committed a crime. Now, again, he didn't do it pre-planned. It was an emotional thing. He was in the heat of the moment. But if you do have the ability to remove yourself and you do not exercise that, then you open yourself up to liability, criminal and or civil.
Well, I mean, the thing about I get what you're saying, and I agree with you to an extent, but they were pushing him down and hitting him. He did have a chance to get up and retreat at that point.
Well, I
Before
was
that,
asking
he could have walked away. You're right. He could have walked away. They were hackling him. They were telling him, get out of here. He could have very well walked away. You're right.
Okay.
But he didn't. And the next thing that happened is they shoved him down, hit him, this, that, and the other, and then the stabbings occurred.
Yeah, I'd like to look at it because it's that is a determining factor. I mean, if you're in a situation of danger, it's fight or flight, right? And
Yeah.
And if these people are displaying violence to you and you can retreat from that violence, you need to try. And if trying and in the process of retreating they continue on, then you're clear. You could blow them away. You could stab them in the jugular vein. I mean, it's over for them. So that may be why they went after the guy. I've never seen the case, so I would have to look at it. But that's why.
Yeah, it's all over. It's all over YouTube. You can go and Law and Crime or any of those shows, and you can. It's called the Apple River Stabbing.
Okay.
And
then
I wanted to go ahead. Go ahead.
Also, unfortunately, most Americans, in today's day and age, follow the fiction, and they get hoodwinked into providing verdicts that probably are unjust. But they're so caught up in this drama, in this, you need to find a villain, and you need to go after people like the Salem witch hunts. That
Yeah.
that does spill over into the jury pools, and people don't get a fair trial because the media and all this other attention that it gets, and they focus on things, and take a position against somebody involved in the case that in most cases it's not accurate. Like with the Kansas City 3, Donna Imes, and many other cases, they create a villain out of conspiracy theories, and then you can't get a fair trial. That's basically why
Well, this trial
Pam Taylor is
lasted.
doing what she's doing.
This trial lasted like 8 days, and
Yeah,
he stabbed 5 people. So I don't understand why that trial seemed to just go on in its normal course. And the one we're at, it seems like every other day we're having a hearing to try to diffuse some situation to keep the process from going. The way we're looking, we'll be at 2030 by the time this is tried.
Yeah, that kid'll be too old. Yeah, yeah. And here's the thing: is that's the judge's job. The judge's only job is to protect you from the government. That's it.
Right.
People misunderstand what the judge's job is, and oftentimes the judges don't know it either. Sadly, they're caught up in the hype that there's something they're not. Mr. Big Deal or a robe. Okay, you're just an American. You just happen to have a job, and your job is to make sure that the government doesn't run the citizen over, especially in criminal proceedings. And that's why I do struggle with that DNA, with him given only partial IgG, that it should have all been given, even the software that they used, and it should have been examined by a separate expert to see the accuracy of that software. They should know how many times did they use this, how many times did it fail, how many times did it succeed.
Right.
And to not be for a court not to rule in that way, in my opinion, is a violation of an American's rights.
Well, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to watch the hearings because it looks like the prosecutor and the judge, they go hand in hand. Like anytime the defense brings up an objection or something, it's almost like the judge is like, "Shut up! I don't want to hear your side." You know what I mean? I
To
could be
some
wrong.
extent, but I think you'll see that he did sustain a couple of her objections, meaning he's like, yeah, you can't do that. You can't testify, Mr. Thompson. He's supposed to come down on what the law and the in the middle, not even the middle, whatever the law says, doesn't matter who it benefits or who it doesn't. It's what the law is. And did the government cross the line? And here, I said this in my stream earlier, and I think it's something we all need to pay attention to. And that judge made the comment that the state has already established that the DNA was not used in their arrest of Brian Koberger. He said that twice so far. And with my experience in being a past criminal that was in front of judges all the time, judges rarely will say something that isn't important to them or doesn't have a bearing on the case.
So if he said that more than once, then they got him another way. I mean, it was either
No. It means I think he's suspicious of the prosecution.
Yeah.
You see, the prosecution says they didn't use the DNA to identify Koberger, and keeps saying, I can't see in the PCA how they identified my client.
Right.
You follow me? So
right.
now you have the defense
It's not written in there how they identified him.
No, well, when you read the PCA, it says a car with a likeness to the defendants is suspect vehicle 1.
Well,
a car that is a likeness isn't his car.
Sarge, if you have a white Elantra, that could have been you. If I have bushy eyebrows, that could have been me.
Right.
I think what she's actually asking is, how the hell are you putting my client in the house, in that car?
Right.
In that car. Let's go ahead and watch this video right quick, and then we'll continue this discussion, okay?
All right.
DeSales University's Forensics and Criminal Investigation class processes a mock crime scene. Hopefully this one's better than the one we just watched.
We're here for CJ 360, which is a criminal justice crime scene investigation class. We're here at a house on campus.
We have some crime scenes set up in the kitchen. There's some upstairs in the bedrooms.
The different scenarios in every room are giving us a real world kind of example of what's going on. So there's different rooms are set up with different mock-ups. Some have guns, some have bats, all fake, obviously. Blood splatter issues. So we're going in there and we're having to do initial processing, looking at the room, walking around, collecting evidence.
Later on, we're doing some fingerprint stuff with the fingerprint powder, and then we are going to possibly do plaster casts and stuff, so outside.
How many footprints did we say? And using it as a real world example of what it would be like to be a criminal investigator investigating a crime scene.
It's really like hands-on. I think I learn a lot better that way too. So I really get into this stuff. It's fun.
It's neat because it's giving us the ability to actually see what these investigators and crime scene processing people do on a daily basis. And maybe even with a psychology degree or criminal justice, it'll give you a better direction of where you want to go.
Okay, that wasn't too bad.
No. I think a lot of us are familiar with those procedures, even though the one thing I don't like about what you see on TV is that consistently in every one of these crime shows, the police or their affiliates are breaking the law and they're making it appear to be justifiable because they caught the right guy.
Yeah.
And whether Americans realize it or not, that's a conditioning or brainwashing of the condition of your mind. You should never see police in any show. Okay. And you see it in all of them. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the mentalist. It could be CSI. All right. These people are violating procedures. And that shouldn't be acceptable. And it shouldn't be put that way in TV shows. The TV show should adhere to exactly how these people should perform their duties. And they should not allow it. And any policeman that steps outside of the bounds, like my example to one person was in the Koberger case where the cop is seen picking up that black jacket by the fire hydrant. If I was his commanding officer and I saw that video, whether that jacket had anything to do with anything, I would issue him a citation for littering as his commanding officer. Okay? Because
That's
you don't
fair
know.
enough.
First of all, you did litter by putting it back where you found it, right? You can't argue that. But secondly, how do you know that's not part of the crime that just recently took place? Why wasn't that brought in for collection and examination and excluded or included? Right?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation about that.
Right.
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 There's been a lot of speculation about that jacket.
Now, it may have nothing to do with the case.
I don't care how the jacket got there. I don't even know if it's really the jacket that everybody's saying it is, but that's neither here nor there. The cops were looking for evidence. So, the fact that people say, well, what were they doing down there? Did they get a tip? What were the cops doing down there so far away from the house? Is that, were they looking for evidence down there because that's where they were murdered, or is that where they were taken from? That's where speculation comes from. Mm-hmm. Who gives a shit what they were doing down there? They were doing their job. They were looking for evidence of any kind of anything that seemed out of the ordinary. They could have stumbled on the murder weapon as they were coming.
Where I draw the line in that is the video of the coat in and of itself tells a small story, but only the story in what you visualize. It does not connect it to the crime nor to Bethany. In no way, shape, or form does it a lot. If you make that leap, there's a mental deficiency in you, as far as I'm concerned. Okay? The likeness of that jacket to a jacket she happened to be wearing that night is a likeness. There's no way.
Well, explain that. Explain that while I go get a drink of water. Explain that to the crowd. Okay. Because I don't think they really understand what you mean by that.
Well, what's happening with most of us in politics and in crime is that we're making judgments, we're making conclusions without factual information. Okay. And so you have a jacket. That's a fact. The jacket looks like something Bethany was wearing the night before. That's an assumption. Now, to connect those two together and argue that was Bethany's jacket and that cop destroyed evidence or didn't do his job is a ridiculous argument. Because unfortunately, the way it was handled and the level of attention that it got leaves you no conclusion to where that coke came from or who it. There's no way you can know now, and you have to accept that. I know it's irritating. I know you want to tell the cop. Would you do that? You want to, right? You want to let the cop know that what he did was wrong. I get it, but aside from that, you have no business connecting that to an individual that was part of a horrific murder, and then going after the cop in the system for corruption because of how he handled that coke. Even if you're right that it was corrupt, you can't prove it. So why get into that big, giant, embellished discussion? It makes no sense to me.
Of course it doesn't. But think about, being a first responder on the scene that morning, and let's say that you didn't have a lot of experience, and this was your first major murder case.
Mhm.
How many of those individuals actually knew what the protocol was? You know what I mean? Like, you can go through the academy, you can read books just like I'm reading books. I'm, taking tests and all this and that and the other. But if they threw me on a murder scene tomorrow, would I know what the hell I was doing? Hell no. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna make, and I'm not saying the cops were crooked in what I'm saying right now. I'm saying that, there's some procedural stuff that could have been overlooked because of inexperience. Not because they were trying to frame anybody, not because they were trying to, um, I don't know,
Well, how
destroy
about
evidence,
this?
any of
Maybe
that.
that's the 20th jacket in his career that he's came across like that, and he's done the same thing with all of them. None of them had anything to do with the crime, possibly not even that one. So I'm not alleging or even want people to believe that what that cop did was corrupt.
Right.
It may have been just he comes across lost and found things, I'm sure, all the fucking time. Should he be thrown on the ground? No. At the very least, it should have been put in the vehicle and put in the police lost and found, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, that's what he should have done with it. That's the procedure. Now, he didn't do that. He threw it back where he found it. That's why I say if I was his commanding officer, I would issue him a citation for littering. Because listen, bro, you found it. There was nobody there to question who it belonged to, so it should have came back to the station. Now, let's not even be crazy here, but you found it in relation to a crime scene where we do have actual video of a girl owning a coat that looked like that. You don't know that. I'm sure this policeman on the scene didn't even know that. But the fact that you came across the jacket in proximity to a quadruple homicide, that in and of itself should have prompted you to bag, tag, and deliver to the station. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean on how they handle this entire crime scene has been handled. The whole town has done this on all kinds of things.
I agree. They've also said that one jacket had a hood and another one didn't, or something of that nature. I don't really remember at the grub truck. I mean, I saw the jacket, but I didn't look at it close enough to really realize whether that jacket had a hood or the one on the hydrant didn't have one. I think they're linking those jackets together based on there's a white little tag
Yeah,
that
I see.
people see. How many jackets do you own that have a tag?
Well, it's
Almost
worse than
every
that. Who
damn one.
in their right mind thinks they're going to solve this from their cell phone?
Right.
I understand. Here's the point. In all fairness, 12 gauge, I understand the criticisms that police officer received and how he handled that coat. But that's the only discussion we can have.
Yeah.
To go off into the weeds that was Bethany's coat, blah blah blah, the blah blah blah, is the act of a paper a-hole. You don't do it. There's no basis to support that, and there never will be, simply because it was mishandled. So you have to let it go. You don't gotta like it, but don't tell all these stories and create all these conspiracy theories about a coat. The viewers
I
seem
mean,
to enjoy that.
there's been, I mean, I'm just ready for the trial because I'm ready for kind of like you were talking about one day on your show about, so many creators. Kaylee was pregnant. Um, all those that you were talking about that night, it just ridiculous. It's ridiculous,
And
it's ridiculous how how every day there's a different puzzle piece that people try to tie to this
Right.
to make it look like there's some kind of, the word of the day, nefarious event that went on that nobody has caught in this year and so many months. And
17.
all of a sudden, some YouTubers saw it, so they caught the interesting fish of the day.
Right. Well, I think the audience is misled, but also the creators themselves are misled in the way they view what they're doing. They're trying to attract an audience for money, and I respect that. However, if you have to invent something to make your point, something that you can't verify, then don't make the point. It's not a point that can be made. And that's where people keep getting tripped up with these conspiracy theories. I mean, we are conspiratorial. All of us are, in a sense, right? There's reason for that. There's good reason to be suspicious of stuff. However, there's never a good enough reason to levy accusations and hate and attack and demean and accuse people without facts. There's never a good there's no reason we should be doing that. And that's what's happening on YouTube, on Twitter, on social medias, and we're better than that.
Yeah, I haven't been on Twitter in a long time. It just got too crazy there. Plus, I can't follow along half the time of what's going on.
Right.
So I
Well,
just stay off that. I stay off Discord. I stay off all that, because I just
I got a Discord room just so we can talk without having
yeah.
It's not a streaming room. It's not a public room where a whole bunch of people come in. It's just people I know. It's like a phone service that's convenient. It's on the computer.
Okay.
So
let me ask you this question, Sarge. Let me ask you this question.
All right, that's be a tough one.
We were talking about this earlier, and we kind of sidestepped it a little bit. When the judge, or when Bill Thompson said one of the questions, there was no evidence that Koberger was stalking the victims. He said that more than once. He said that is false. That is a false question. How can you not hear that and still make that a conspiracy? I've seen that all day long today. He was lying. He was lying. Brian was stalking the girls, and I remember seeing it here and there, and blah blah blah. How can you make that a conspiracy when the
I'm going to tell you how. You know how. We've already discussed this. You already know the answer. The word starts with a B. The word starts with a B. You've
baloney.
No. The word starts with a B. The user is believing.
Yeah,
something.
believing.
And when you believe something, no contravening fact will change your belief. That's the problem with believing in information. It's the most dangerous, it's the most heretical thing, if you want to be religious, that we do as human beings. You weren't supposed to believe in knowledge. You were only supposed to believe in God. Your believing stops with God. If you don't believe with God and you believe in there being no God, your belief must stop with that. You do not believe documents that are released or statements other people make. All right. And then stop that, because that's what believing does. It prevents you from thinking any further or researching or trying to understand, because once you believe, you know all there is to know, and nothing will change your mind. That's why there's so many people still out here arguing that he did stalk. And then when someone like me comes forward and says, you're not understanding that the probable cause accusations are his alibi. You can't wrap your head around that, because you believe he did it, and you believe any accusation that confirms that cognitive dissonance in your head that he did it, you believe it. You don't question it, you simply believe it. And when you stop questioning information and data because you believe it, you're a brainwashed person. And you don't even know you're brainwashed, because you can't believe that can happen to you, when in fact you certainly are brainwashed when you do that.
Exactly. I agree with that, because your beliefs are homegrown. Like if you were raised in a racist home, chances are you're going to turn out to be racist. I mean, you could be against it.
You could grow out of it. You could learn if you yes, you're right.
But you have to challenge your own thinking. You have
Okay,
to challenge your thinking to create a different belief system.
When I say my divorce included two people and we were both wrong, I'm not just saying that to try to be smart or to be fucking cute or to try to get people to like me.
Right.
It's an undeniable truth. That's why. Have you ever heard me ever say anything negative about my ex-wife?
No.
Oh, dude, I got volumes. I could start now. You would never be able to hang up the phone. I wouldn't let you. Okay. But I don't do it because it doesn't provide any value to anybody and it means nothing because it's over. It's in the past. Right. So I was thrown out of my house at 14. I can make a case of how horrific my step parents were. To what end? I benefited from it. As time passed, things happen and life changes. Right. And unfortunately, we've been conditioned to just, you got to believe the authorities. You got to believe the judge. You got to believe the jury. You got to believe the cop. You got to believe your teacher. And that's not how you're supposed to think. Your brain isn't designed to just believe everything. It's designed to question everything. And
I think where we've gone wrong is though people have taken it too far, that their belief system, they're incapable of compromise. Like they are incapable of saying, well, you could be correct, but I don't have to change my belief because I believe that you could be, you know, correct. I'm going to stick with my belief system, even though I think that you're incorrect.
The definition of belief, if you research what that word means, belief is an act that you make that requires no proof or evidence in what you believe. That's the power of belief. Look it up. I'm not making that up.
Oh.
When you apply that kind of view of when you apply that as a way to observe data and information, you're screwing yourself.
Yeah.
The idea that Brian Kober, I'll say this, I accept this to be possible, that the PCA, when they say they see a likeness to Koberger's car, is telling me they didn't see Koberger's car. But if there's other evidence that can place him in that house and show that he parked down the street and walked to that house, and if there's evidence to support that, I will accept it. You see, I'm not like on Brian Koberger's innocent and nothing, and everything I look at means the only lens I have is he's innocent. That's not the way you look at information. Both pieces are relevant. He did it or he didn't do it. Both pieces have their data, and both pieces then have to be examined to see which side of the argument holds more water. That's what you do with data. It's pretty simple. So I'm not like
there's going to be a moment. There's going to be a moment where we're going to find out one way or the other. We're going to eventually find out, whether it be in 2030, whether it be in 2045, whenever
33, yeah, 3090.
Yeah, they might bring Judge Ito from the dead to look over this case, but
right. What if they got a break in the case and they do show Brian Koberger from something that they missed in their investigation? Does that mean I'm going to rest on my laurels and argue that stuff isn't true? It can't be right. No, I wouldn't do that. I would happily accept that information, not because you're educating me. You're showing me that in fact this man committed the crime. But based on the data you've already given me, 12 gauge, I can't agree with that conclusion.
It's just hard for me to be on the side that there were so many people in a conspiratorial role that got together to frame one person.
Yeah, I don't see it as
I can't wrap my brain around that. No matter how much you try to convince me, no matter if you can, you try to tell me, well, he was connected to this family, who was connected to that family, who owed money from this family, who had a vendetta against this family, and blah, blah, blah. Well, how the hell did it end up to this one person If all this has been going on for all these years, how come they didn't frame somebody else further down the line, up the ladder?
Well,
How
let me say, you know how you asked, how can people that hear what the prosecution is saying that stalking them is a false information? It's false. Okay. How can they still believe Koberger did it? And what you're pointing out right here, what you just said is because I don't believe anybody in the police department framed Koberger intentionally, but they believed what they thought. And everything they looked at from there forward fit into their belief. Yeah. And once the police believe you did it, you're fucked. Excuse my language. They're coming for you, 12 gauge. And that could be simply because they call it cognitive dissonance. They have a point of view. They have a conclusion. They believe it. And of all people and of all professions, investigators should never believe in the information in front of them. Never believe in it, but accept it for its face value and then confirm or dispatch it. That's their job.
Yeah, their job is just to gather the evidence, not to
they can interpret it. They can interpret it, but you got to be careful.
But you can't get so far involved in it that you're trying to convict or you're trying to, you know what I'm saying? You can't be swaying one way or the other because that's when you get into trouble.
Right. You see
that's when you get into the Giglio stuff that you were talking about. That's when you start planting evidence or, destroying evidence or, just lying about the paperwork, the note that you're taking, what you saw or what you didn't see. It just that famous word that you've always said, corruption.
Corruption is an endemic part of the system. But let me also point out something and this just dawned on me. That's why I like talking to you. You do inspire me to think. But the belief brings out our emotions as well. When you believe in something, there's an emotional attachment to it. Okay. And that's why people get so sternly ingrained and they hold their ground and they will not listen to reason because they believe something. And it's an emotional attachment to this idea that Koberger definitely did it.
Of course.
And no matter what comes out through the court system, it's because Ann is playing loopholes. In other words, their belief is so well ingrained and they're so attached to it emotionally that no evidence is good enough for them to be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem with belief. It erases all of your ability to be reasonable.
And that belief system gets fed every day by misinformation, and it gives you a sense of pleasure. Yes. That's why people plug in every day, because they want to get that pleasure. They want to get their cup of coffee. They want to get their toast or their eggs or their bacon. And they want to sit down and listen to whoever it is that they believe is giving them the best information that they believe in as well. So they can sit there and plug in and feed that pleasure area of the limbic system so they can get high. It's almost like was it you that said that was talking about addiction, being addicted to this true crime or whatever? Were you talking about that?
To some extent. I think that word gets thrown around more than it needs to be, but
yeah, I saw that somewhere, but that made a lot of sense. It's almost like people get high every day listening to creators. And if they get high listening to me, well, keep coming back. I'm not getting a dime from this, so I hope you enjoy it.
And the other thing is, we all want to have a sense of being a part of and mattering.
Of course.
Right. And unfortunately, rather than us, there's just so many things we could do that are so good for each other. And none of that has any place in any of these discussions for folks. They allow themselves to and look, I bring up creators and I bring up things creators said to just remind the viewer of the insanity that we allow as viewers. We shouldn't tolerate JLR stalking that guy and the family, the Proudfoots. We as viewers should not tune into that. It provides no value. And now you got Betty Bullhorn bullshit person's going to go down there and probably try to pick up the same thing. And look at the reason I am so hard on those creators is because what they're doing is wrong. And they're creating witch hunts and they're creating tragedy amidst an already tragic situation. I mean, why do you want to pile on to these people's pain? I
And
don't.
you know the unfortunate. You remember that show Cheaters that they used to show late at night? I don't know if you ever saw it, but there was this guy.
Were you on it? Were you like featured?
No, unfortunately, not. But there was this guy named Joey Greco, and he was the host. Well, they would get a camera crew. They do an
Oh, I've
investigation.
seen it. Yeah.
Well, this one show, he was out on this boat. They caught the guy cheating or whatever. Well, the guy stabbed him on live TV, threw him in the water, and you think after that, I mean, I'm sure they changed their tactics. And that's what it's going to take, unfortunately, is somebody's going to have to harm one of these YouTube creators that think that they're above the law.
Listen,
And, you know, it's going to get pretty tragic, and it's
you remember
sad.
Donna Eyes? You remember Donna Eyes?
Yes, I
And they
do.
accused that cop of being the woman that's the cop's fault she's dead.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. And then they all wanted to ID the cop, find out who the cop was, what her name was, blah, 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 whatever, right? And
Yeah.
right away the witch hunt starts.
Yeah.
You see? And this is being pushed to you folks, courtesy of creators, but creators only push that, folks, because you accept it and you play along with it.
Right.
If we all put our foot down and said no more of this, or just stop report, come in here, go watch 12 gauge. What, I don't even know how many people are in here, but if there's one of you, watch this guy. You don't even got to watch me, ignore me. Watch this guy. He's at least got more of a content. He's educating the people on different things that matter. And he's got a level head. He's willing to have a discussion. He's not stuck on Brian did it, Brian didn't do it. He's not stuck in that hole. Right?
Yeah,
We need
because
more creators like that. And you see how the truth gets no views, but the bullshit gets all the views? That's why you got one or two people in your chat room. It's because you're not selling bullshit.
exactly. Now, if
Sad.
I was, what do you call him, Gitta?
I like it, even though he probably don't like me. I like the guy in spite of himself.
I like that guy too. I mean, like his information is flawless most of the time. I mean,
No, he's not flawless. He brings up
well,
stuff,
I
but there's
mean,
no,
you know, I've seen
but he's
stuff.
better. He's definitely pretty good.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't want to inflate his head, but he does have some good content. But some of it is a little out there. When he gets in his emotions, then his content suffers. But if he's just talking about information, he can deliver it pretty good.
Like
I
for a
don't.
long time, he was running around calling me a guilter.
Just
For a
calling
long
you.
time, yeah, and then for a long time, people were running around saying I was pro Koberger, and I'm not.
Well, shit, I've been called a
I'm not
guilter
either.
too. I've been called a guilter too. I mean, I had some troll in here quizzing me in the chat, one question after the other, and he ended up calling me a guilter. And I was like, Jeff was on here with me, and I asked Jeff, I said, what the hell is a guilter? Because I mean, all these words that people, I mean, I feel like we're in kindergarten or something where people are like calling you names and stuff.
Inventing things to call you.
You know, it's like you got to label me in order for you to distance yourself from me. You can't just say, "Hey, I don't like that guy, so I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not going to do any of this." No, I got to call you a name, and I got to stick you in a category, and I got to stick you with these people, and this is who you are to me. It's insane.
And that's what drives social media. It's not just the YouTube and their creators. It's social media. It's Instagram. It's Facebook. It's Twitter. And here's the funny thing. You're going to remember this forever. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The internet is the closest thing to God that we have. In as much as we can share ideas and impact the world because of this device's ability to allow us to communicate amongst ourselves. And what have we done with it? We've turned it into a schoolyard of bullshit. Yeah. Chasing conspiracy theories, going down rabbit holes, witch hunting, following people, outing people, doxing people, threatening people. But this particular item called the internet is a tool that could bring more good to humanity than any other tool we have.
Of course. I mean, it connects people like nothing else, and it's unfortunate how we reinforce stereotypes about Americans the way other countries see us. It's sad,
Right.
but we reinforce those stereotypes. It really is. There's no wonder why they don't like us, why they hate us, why they have
Of
these
course.
these belief systems about who we are as Americans and
You know,
why we should be taken off the planet.
here's a funny thing. People that have actually paid attention for the last many years and what's going on around the world, the same people that argued against universal health care, those people argue against universal health care because the question isn't posed properly. And because they're against government, which I get. You always got to be suspicious of government people in power. But if the question is asked, we spent $21 trillion on foreign wars, wouldn't you rather have had a fellow American get health care?
Of course.
Okay. So my point is, this is what makes the internet the most powerful thing that man had, the closest thing to God that we've ever created, because if given the chance, people can find middle ground on a scale that's unimaginable. We all have the same needs, desires, and our wants and things are different. We may look different. We may talk different, but we all need water. We all need food. We all want safety, right? We all want to be healthy. These commonalities are what we can work towards. And the argument that free healthcare is a government bill, that's a discussion that maybe we should have not taken, and we should have examined whether these wars were in the best interest of this country, because they weren't. How many years did we spend in Afghanistan, and the poppy fields are bigger now than when we got there? Are you serious? Isn't heroin a drug killing our kids? And our military didn't look at a simple bottle of Roundup could have changed that.
Yeah.
You could have went to Home Depot and got Roundup and changed that. And
Right.
so here's what I'm saying. When we see these problems and how big they are, and really the solution on all of them is something in the middle. I can respect that you think the world is going to flood. I can respect that by not attacking that. You're okay to agree the global warming is going to flood the globe. I don't have to discuss that with you. Some of your solutions need to be discussed, though.
Yeah.
Right? The dependence on windmills. People don't know windmills cannot generate enough electricity to create another windmill. I don't know if you knew that, but my point is, these discussions
I
are
live over here, and there's a bunch of them, and they just don't. I mean, just based on intellect, I'm not the most intellectual person in the world, but I can tell when a windmill's not spinning fast enough
right.
to generate much energy, much less anything else. And I found out that the windmills that we had over here weren't even connected to a power grid. They were just out there turning.
My
So they
point is,
were-
well, we get separated by these conspiracy theories. We get separated by these witch hunts, and we don't realize that if we didn't allow ourselves to get separated like that, and we concentrated on something that matters, how quickly it would change. That's the reason I do what I do in the streams, and I say what I say.
That's what our country was founded on. But somewhere along the line, people wanted their individuality. They felt like the government was just imposing too much on them. Well, we still have rights. Whether people believe that or not, we still have rights. And we are more powerful united than we are separated.
Correct. And the powers that be want to keep us separated. But here's the last thing I'll say on this, because I don't want to wear you out.
All right.
All of the people on social media are the very people that tell you they don't believe or trust mainstream media. But if you stand back and separate yourself and look in, you'll see that everything you're doing on social media is a reflection of what mainstream media is doing. It's an identical reflection. The faces are different, but the attitudes, the processes, and the topics are all the same. So whether you follow the media or not, what you're not understanding is you're doing and playing the media's game. You're dividing and separating each other. We're doing that to ourselves.
Well, social media, there is really no no filter. There's no governing body. So mainstream media, at least they have somebody to govern them a little bit to say, hey, you can't
There
talk.
you go.
Well, to an extent, they can't really say half the shit that they say on their social media platform.
Well, look
I
at
hear,
well, that's not true. Look at that Nancy Grace. Look at Nancy
I hear
Grace.
this guy talking about people sucking his, you know what, every day. I mean,
Oh yeah,
drunk.
stuff like that. But the media is very cagey in that there's no news shows. They're all opinion programs, kind of like what we're doing right now. It's you could
Yeah,
write that off to people's opinion, right?
right.
But what I'm saying again is that's curable by us, we the people. We don't need the media to do anything but what it's doing. We need to change what we're doing in spite of what they're doing. You follow me?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of message, that's the kind of thing that's going to help all of us. And the true crime in politics, there's no two better examples of how crazy we all are with this.
Exactly. I agree with you. Well, thank you so much for coming up, Sarge.
Hey, you're
Thank
the
you so
man.
much. I'm gonna, if you want to stick around after the show, we can have a little.
Yeah, I'll stick around for a few minutes. It's still
Okay, I'm
early here.
gonna.
I got nothing to do until this coming Monday. I reopened my business this week.
All right,
So
cool. I'm gonna go ahead and close out the show. I'll put you down at the bottom here. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Those of you that are going to be watching this on a replay, I hope that you get the general consensus of what I was trying to portray, as well as when Sarge came up and what we were talking about, as far as everything that we've been discussing on the IDAHO4 case and everything that's aligned with it. There's so much parallel that if you open your eyes, you can really see a lot of insight that we're trying to portray out here in both of our channels. So once again, thank you so much for all the support and all the love, all the likes. If you do like what I present or what Sarge presents on his channel, please be cool and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and you know what time it is. Maestro, cue the music.